G'day guys, it's Steve from Chalk and Q, and welcome back to another Q restoration. This one was brought in by one of our customers, and it's around about 25 years old. Q's been sitting in a cupboard for quite some time, holds a little bit of sentimental value, and they've decided that they wanted to bring it back to former glory. It was covered in a very thick and heavy varnish, a lot of corrosion on all of our brass components. And as you can see towards the end of the Q, towards the tip, there is a slight bow in it. So what we've done here is we've put it onto our lathe, and we're starting off with around about 120 grit paper, just very lightly to take off that thick coat of varnish which yellowed, and also to expose some of the grain. It's been a very challenging one in terms of that, because there's a very fine balance between removing that very old coat and also not removing any of the wood. So as you can see here, we're starting off machine wise first and going through. We'll be moving on from that to a very lengthy hand sanding process. It's moving on from our 120 grit, moving all the way up to steel wool to finish. Now the idea here is, because we wanted to use our secret sauce, that's one of our coatings that we have. We want to turn around and not close up the pores by burning out the layer at the top. So it is important that when moving through the layers of sandpaper, that you don't push too hard and let the paper do the work. But also you do have to realise that if you actually go too hard and you burnish, you are going to have to open that back up again, because otherwise the pores aren't going to absorb the oil and you are not going to get the finish and longevity out of the Q. As you can see here, we've gone through and put it all the way to the end of our 3-jaw vise with some custom 3D printed pieces. And that's allowed us to do the entire Q and get it down to a really good base. Now that we've finished our machine sanding, we are moving on to the lengthy hand sanding process. Now this does take quite some time. It is important that when you are doing your hand sanding, that you are going up and down with the grain as opposed to the rotational part there. So you will see from the butt working our way forward and doing the intricate details around the badge work. There was a little bit of corrosion around there, so we did move forward with that all the way up and through. We've also steamed out a few dents towards the end, so when you find a varnished Q that wood has been knocked around over the years, it is quite difficult to get those dents out. One of the things we do is a light steam. Again, this does help to increase the pores and open them up and pushes the wood out. So you don't want to do it terribly hard. It's more of a trial and error way of doing it there, but more so you err on the safe side of caution so you don't damage anything. Now moving down the shaft again, we are doing it with a 600 grit paper, and this is quite a fine paper, but not as fine as it could be. We do move forward with that all the way to the end, and this process will continue for some time, so I'll let you get back to the goodies, and when we start to move on towards the end, I'll talk you through the way that we do our coating. coming towards now the end of the hand sanding process. We will be moving the tip out there all the way through on the drawers and working our way towards the end of the cue, and we'll also be doing a light restoration on the ferrule to begin with. We'll continue doing more of that when we get into the process of changing the tip. From this process, and unfortunately not shown, is our coating process, which involves a combination of boiled linseed oil and a few other extra goodies that we have created. Now, this process is quite lengthy and does require drying time. We'll also be steaming the cue ever so slightly to get rid of the bend in the shaft area towards tip. That part will be a very light steam. Again, we will do that after we do our treatment with the boiled linseed oil. And from that point, it becomes quite an interesting thing. Now, moving on. This here is the beginning of the tip replacement. As you can see, there is still a tiny wobble in the cue, but we've managed again just to straighten that out. There has been a hanging process which has been completed as well. So this here is using our lathe to remove the old tip. Now you'll see as a tip sits and ages, it becomes soft and spongy. It doesn't really play very well. You won't get the same sort of reaction out of it. It absorbs a lot of the energy without transferring it to the ball properly. So you watch it mushroom up here and become quite fluffy, as you can see it. It'll just pop off. But the glue had also started to let go as well. So it was high time it was all changed regardless. Now we begin the process very simply and gently of cleaning up the face there, so with the tenon and also the edge of the ferrule. Now this particular part does take a little bit of media off the ferrule and also a little bit off the tenon, not too much, but again this assures a super flat surface design so your glue will adhere perfectly. A little bit of sandpaper just to rough it up ever so slightly. Check the edge of the ferrule just to make sure there's no high points and smooth that off there, and we're good to go to start placing our tip. Now the tip which has been chosen today is a medium tone professional. It is a 14mm, so we wanted to shave it down. This was more of something of an experiment with a longer tip here. Again, one gluing and then doing our compress. We use our chuck from our drill point and we will give it a bit of a push on and we'll rejoin when it's time to shape. Now once we've finished cutting our rough shape, we move on to the printed face. We want to take off probably around about 1 mil off the top. Again, that ensures that you're going to get an easier way to shape the tip. It will also ensure that you're moving through the first layer nice and easy. Moving on to our next stage, where we use a blade and the hand. Now this ensures that, as you can see, there's a little bit of a wobble there in what it is. It ensures that we're able to mate the tip surface perfectly to the actual ferrule. Now there are many times where you can try to do this with the machine and it will work if the cue is perfectly straight. But in this case, we are not 100% straight. Again, we are dealing with a 25-year-old cue here, which has been sitting in a cupboard, so it is to be expected. But again, we're just given a good clean, give it the basis of a good shape. Now we bring in our guide and move it into position. Our guide allows us to get a really fine edge between the tip and the ferrule, and also to give us good shape on the tip as well. So it gives us a bit of a guide for an accurate dome. As you can see, we do have a couple of different sizes there, so if we are doing 11mm English brake cues, or even Chinese 8-ball cues, which are multi-layered, it gives us the flexibility to do whichever one we need to. Now we move from our initial shape and we'll bring it in just a touch closer and we get done with our final shaping here. So this is removing the last parts of the media and bringing it right up to the ferrule. So get it that nice clean edge. And then we start our rounding process for the tip. Now with English 8-ball, there are some players that prefer a really dome tip. Some players which prefer a flatter tip. I mean, look, drop a comment, let us know what style of tip do you guys play with. You one with a really rounded edge, or do you have one which is fairly flat? These days I'm getting asked actually to do a lot more of the flatter one with a slight dome, only a very slight dome. And that's due to the new technology within the tips as well, especially the Tarm Fusion, which has a really hard center core and softer edges. So if you do have that flat in the center there, you'll get great action off the cue using those tips. Moving on to our final process here. Now this is applying a little bit of candy. Let's get it all nice and shiny, and we're also going to burnish the edges of our tip here. Burnishing the edges, for anyone who's not aware, will stop the tip from mushrooming out prematurely. It helps to keep its shape, and it also provides a really beautiful decorative coating as well. So it serves a couple of purposes here. Now we use 4-0 steel wool. We generally don't use anything heavier than that in this process, only because for polishing wise it just comes up perfect, and it will burnish too. We'll also increase the speed here of the lathe when we do that as well, roughly to around about 2500 RPM, so it really gets in there and gives it a good work. One of our final processes now is to give the tip a final shape. This involves getting our 400 grit sandpaper and slowly working it. We do remove a little bit of media off the end of the tip, but we do have a fair amount to play with, so this way we can actually give it the chalk a good mating surface to grab onto. final polish now with the microfiber cloth, just to clean up any residue from any parts there and give it that beautiful finish. And we can almost call this one done. And there you have it, guys, the finished product. It's an absolute gorgeous piece of timber. The brass came up fantastically. If you have a cue that you'd like to give a second lease of life to, reach out to us at Chalk & Cue. We'd be happy to go through this process with you, and we do take orders from anywhere in Australia to get this done. Thanks, guys. If you loved the video, like, share and subscribe, and once again, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.